nice to see you. It's a long time. Long time. Okay, so maybe we'll start. Good to see you. Good to see you all. We start our press conference. We have Ambassador Nebenzia as speaker. Ambassador, you have the floor. Of course, we are going to have some questions, take some questions after a short introductory remarks.
I'll comment about questions. First of all, it's so nice to see you. Long time, as I said, and it's been such a long time that I really forgot how to do press conferences or how to do stakeouts. So I'm not sure that that I'll be very vocal today, but I will try my best. So further.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador, and it's very good to see you here in person. So my question is on Syria cross-border aid. UN, US, and others warn of dire humanitarian consequences for over 1 million Syrians if all border crossings are closed. So are there any chances to find a common ground on the draft that would renew the authorization for 12 months before the deadline of the July 10th? Thank you so much.
I'm surprised this question came first. Yes, indeed, you know that our colleagues in the Security Council, the pen holders, they produced a draft which will be first discussed today. We told them in the very beginning that what we hear from our colleagues about reopening the closed cross-border points is really a non-starter. We are discussing the one that is remaining in Idlib, Bab Al Hawa namely. When we were extending cross-border last year till 10th of July this year, we were very clear that we, besides the cross-border, we have to ensure stable deliveries from the crossline, from inside the Syria, as well as on rectifying the defects of the cross-border, including marking, labeling the humanitarian trucks and the control over the distribution of assistance. We had a meeting on humanitarian Syria the other day. You might have followed it, and there was a lady from the NGO that delivers humanitarian assistance to Syria. We were asking her questions. What are her monitoring mechanisms and who are these people that distribute humanitarian assistance? Frankly, we didn't get any clear answer on that, except for the assurances that this is being done very prudently, that the information is being triangled, that it is only based on community on those people whom communities trust, etc., etc. So the questions are still there. Meanwhile, in the same time, we've been struggling with a single humanitarian convoy, a joint convoy by the ICRC, UN, Syrian Red Crescent Society, for which the Syrian government, Damascus, gave permission as long as last April 2020. Still nothing happened, and this really became ridiculous. We understand who is stalling those deliveries, and that brings a larger question of what will happen to Idlib, in Idlib in general, because it is no secret that Idlib is controlled by a terrorist organization listed as such in the Security Council. The organization that betrays itself as the civil administration of Idlib. We know the ways how they administer Idlib and what they are doing inside of it. But it is no secret that this humanitarian aid in particular is a great help to not just to the people of Idlib, but to that organization itself, namely Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Now, if we talk about cross-border in general, we have to recognize that cross-border in Syria is a unique operation. unique in the sense that it is the only operation of that nature of humanitarian assistance in the world. Nowhere else in the world cross-border is being used, and of course it totally contradicts the humanitarian principles of rendering humanitarian assistance and principles of international humanitarian law, for which our partners so vehemently advocate. And it also violates another condition, which is a must in any humanitarian operation: the agreement of the recipient government. The Syrian government never liked cross-border. The Syrian government always said that it's a violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Syrian government wants to close cross-border. And when we hear that there is no alternative, I think it's a little bit of a slyness, because when Yerubia was closed, which you, of course, well remember, we also heard that that will be a disaster for the population of Northeast. But today, facts on the ground say, and UN confirms that they have increased humanitarian assistance to the northeast of Syria through the Syrian government, through the cooperation with the Syrian government, and in general, the humanitarian assistance in Syria on territories which are controlled by the Syrian government has improved dramatically since the time the cross-border operation was introduced, and it was introduced in special circumstances when there was no access to many parts of Syria, not just northwest. But of course today it is an outdated operation, and eventually it will be closed.
Okay, we'll take row by row. Pamela.
Thank you, Fedor, and thank you, Ambassador. It's good to see you in person. Pamela Falk from CBS News. My question is a bigger one. Your president and President Xi signed a peace treaty or re-upped the friendliness treaty. Do you see an impact here at the United Nations with Russia and China? And can you give an update on Trevor Reed, or the U.S. Marine who was in jail? I understand you might not know about it, but there was some indication that there might be an exchange of U.S. and Russian people in jail. Thank you.
Well, on the prolongation of the treaty, how it will affect our work here and our relations with the Chinese, I don't see any immediate consequences, because our relations with the Chinese were very close before we prolonged the treaty, and they will remain so. On the exchange, indeed, I don't have much to add to it. Only I also read from the press and from the account of the meeting in Geneva that this issue was discussed, and there were indications that there will be further consideration. But where we are on that now, I have no idea, frankly.
Thank you.
Ambassador James Bays from Al Jazeera. A quick follow-up, then a question. Just want to be absolutely clear on what you said with cross-border. Are you saying you currently do not see a need for even a single border crossing? Is that your current position? Because this is coming to a vote very soon.
We have to do one thing or another before July 10, which is Saturday, and I hope we can do it before Saturday. Of course, we have to do it before Saturday, one or another. I will not give you any definitive answer at this time. I will only say that we continue consulting on that issue.
And my actual question, my wider question, is there are human rights activists and some council members who would like to see tougher action, particularly on Tigray and Myanmar. They'd like to see sanctions in place. There are some council members, you are one of them, that doesn't support that policy. Can you explain to us why, and whether you see the point that's made by some, that if the Security Council doesn't take punitive action in cases like this, then it risks becoming toothless and irrelevant?
I think these accusations are leveled on the Security Council, have been leveled on the Security Council since its inception. And you know, the Security Council is a body of a collective wisdom, or the absence of such in certain cases. So you cannot adopt a decision unless you have full agreement in the Security Council. I mean, I'm not teaching you, lessons on that. You know it perfectly well. But you need agreement and you need consensus. Consensus means that you need to compromise on things. And of course, we view one situation or another, perhaps in a different light. In what concerns Tigray, we are of course concerned with the humanitarian situation there. Although we have to recognize that the bulk of humanitarian assistance to Tigray was and still is being provided by the Ethiopian government. But of course we are advocating, as others, the humanitarian access for the international organizations as well. What happened in the recent days, the unilateral ceasefire that the Ethiopian government announced gives us a light glimmer of hope, because we always said that there is no solution to any crisis which in particular is waged by military means. There is no solution to this crisis by military means, only a political solution will work. How that will translate in what was happening in Ethiopia, is it a temporary lull, or is it a road which will pave the way to the political settlement? That is a question to be addressed. You know that some of our colleagues are advocating an open briefing on the situation in Ethiopia. We most probably will have it, but I must say that indeed we always say that the Security Council is to discuss the situation of international peace and security. And there is a question which still is yet to be answered, whether the situation in Ethiopia represents a threat to international peace and security. That depends on the angle from which you look at the situation, of course. But to a large extent, of course, it is a domestic affair. And we are, yes, we do not hide it, we are in principle opponents of discussing domestic issues on the agenda of the Security Council.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good to see you again.
I didn't recognize you. You have a nice mask.
You want me to take it off? Thank you for the briefing. A follow-up on Syria. While you say you're going to consult on this, largely what you've said this morning would indicate that you're swaying towards not renewing this cross-border operation. Would that be a fair assessment?
I understand you want to extract an answer from me, but I would like to maintain the intrigue, okay?
So the United States then has said that if it can't work with Russia to renew this operation, that could impact further cooperation between the United States and Russia on Syria. What do you interpret that to mean? What areas could be affected?
I think you have to ask those who made that statement. We hear from our American colleagues after the summit, which was, by all accounts, a successful event in the sense that that was a professional dialogue without hiding, of course, differences which nobody hides. And there were agreements, or rather understandings reached there on a few areas, in particular, of course, on strategic stability, on cybersecurity, for which we advocated a long time. We wanted US to engage on cybersecurity much earlier. I mean, from earlier days, from the days when they were leveling accusations about this cyber crimes that allegedly Russia committed, and we were asking them to sit at the table and compare notes. Finally, Biden administration agreed to engage in this, and this is a very welcome development. We were willing it. There was an understanding that we'll continue our dialogue on regional situations, including Syria. Of course, bilateral issues which are still pending and which is a very big irritant in our relations. Now, on a particular, but then when the summit was over and it was commented by, including by the representative of the US administration, both in the White House and in the State Department, We hear again conditions which Russia has to meet before U.S. will engage on certain issues. We've been saying many times over, and we continue to say that we are prepared to engage, to cooperate, but not on the condition of conditions. And that's a very clear thing. And I heard also that what you said, that cross-border is a litmus test of our future engagement in Syria. Well, I think that U.S. is interested in engagement on Syria no less than Russia does, with Russia and with the international community at large. So I think that this is not the way how a mutually respectful cooperation is being envisaged. Let's see. We also have questions to the United States on its engagement in Syria and other regional issues. But we are not putting conditions on the table to engage in those consultations. I would like to address you, by the way, to an article that Minister Lavrov wrote the other day for the Russian press, and it is available. It is available on the Russian Foreign Ministry website. The article is called "Law, Rights and Rules," and it will give you a clue to many things that we are discussing. I mean, the way Russia sees the world, the way Russia sees how it is being approached, it is being looked at, and how we look at those things about the international cooperation, about multilateralism, about rules, about laws. And about rights as well. I think that you'll be interested to read it. I hope you will do it.
Just one further quick question on Myanmar. The Russian military is boosting its ties with Myanmar, is selling weapons to Myanmar. Does this mean that Russia accepts the coup and doesn't believe that power should be handed back to the civilian government?
Look. Do we have an arms embargo with Myanmar? Can I ask a reciprocal question? We do not. I can answer.
You don't. The
yes.
General Assembly overwhelmingly called for one.
You know what the results of the vote was? Okay, it was not a unanimous decision by the General Assembly. We are not advocates of any country situation to be discussed in the General Assembly because frankly it's not its business, if I may put it bluntly. But that is a trend of the recent years, that these country situations and other issues that do not belong to the General Assembly, but they cannot be promoted through other UN organs which are more appropriate to deal with those situations, are being put to the General Assembly with an idea of sheer majority to adopt one resolution or the other. And Myanmar resolution was one of such resolutions, but it was not adopted with overwhelming majority. The situation is there. Is very difficult. It is not. You cannot assess it, with like black and white. Yes, we are for the restoration of the normal functioning of the country. You know that military committed to hold elections, but you have to recognize that military is a part of the Myanmar landscape. It has been this way a long time before the current situation, and they will never go anywhere. They will be part of the political landscape of Myanmar in the future. You cannot tell military, pack your things and go. They will stay there. They will be part of the how the country operates. So we have to look at that, not from a black and white point of view, but taking all factors into account.
Edie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Very nice to see you. Please do this often. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-ups. First, when you talked about the United States putting conditions on certain issues, aside from the cross-border issue, was there anything else that you were thinking of or you believe that conditions have been imposed? And it sounds like you're disappointed in the follow-up to the summit between Presidents Putin and Biden. Are you concerned that that it's not going in the right direction? And then I have a follow-up on Syria, but not on cross-border.
I'm not concerned about the follow-up because there was no follow-up yet. It yet has to follow. And I hope it will follow soon. I know it's not my piece of cake, as you know. It's mostly bilateral issues and bilateral dialogue. I know that the dialogue on strategic stability is said to be starting sometime in July, and they are working, I understand, on both sides to prepare for it. I read yesterday in the press that Ambassador Sullivan, who arrived back in Moscow, said that he's planning shortly, and he already started, to discuss bilateral issues with his Russian counterparts, meaning the aim is to normalize our bilateral relations, which are a shame, frankly. You cannot recall anything like that in the whole history of U.S.-Russian relations. Bilateral relations, including diplomatic relations, which are unprecedented in any time, in any point of time, and that affects not just our functioning of our diplomatic entities here in the States, but U.S. and Moscow as well. It was not our choice. We never aspired for that, and we want to rectify it as soon as possible. I think that's the easiest thing to null, to cancel what has happened in the last 4 years. Visas, properties, personnel, etc. I hope it can be done. So on cybersecurity, I have no idea when it will start, but the commitment was, or at least a pledge was made. And on other issues, on regional issues, this dialogue, one way or the other, it was happening before. It is not that we are starting it from scratch. I hope it will be more structured dialogue, but let's see. Let's see where and what format and when.
My follow-up on Syria is that the Special Representative, Gar Peterson, is proposing that the international community, a larger group, hold a meeting to actually start discussing steps that could be agreed on, that could actually form a base for an eventual political agreement and peace. Does Russia support this, and do you believe that, excuse me, that this is a positive way to try and move the stalemate on moving toward peace forward?
Whoever can contribute to the political settlement in Syria is mostly welcome. And if that eventual format, which is only an idea that Geir aired, including in the last meeting on political Syria here in the Council, how it will work out, that's a big question. Whether it will work out, it's a big question. At present, we have basically two working mechanisms on Syria, on the political and other tracks. The other question is how they are working. I'm not touching upon this at present, but this is the Constitutional Committee. and the Astana format, which will take place 7-8 July, and Geir will be there, by the way, which discusses more technical, down-to-earth issues with the Syrian government and the opposition and the guarantors. The Constitutional Committee at present is the only body that deals with the political settlement in Syria. Besides, of course, the Security Council that discusses it on a monthly basis. The sixth session of the Constitutional Committee yet has a chance to convene in July. The preparations are still going on, and Geir was not elaborating on that when he was in the Security Council, but they are working behind the scenes on agreeing on the format of the meeting. And I personally think, from what I know, that an agreement on how to proceed can be reached. The other thing is that the Constitutional Committee cannot become a hostage of technical issues and technical differences. And of course, we count on Geir and the UN as a facilitator of that process, and that is their mandate, to facilitate, not of course to impose anything on either side, because it's only the Syrians, as we all know, who can, must, and are entitled to settle and to move the process forward. So I cannot answer to your question definitively, because that was an idea. Nothing has been established. Whether it will be helpful, that is yet to see. There's nothing yet to discuss, because we don't have anything established.
Sylvia.
Ambassador, there is a growing connection between Russia and the sub-Saharan country. Russia was one of the first countries to back the coup in Mali. What is the influence?
Russia was the first country to what? Sorry.
To, let's say, recognize the coup in Mali.
Recognize the coup. What do you mean, recognize the coup?
To meet with the leaders of the coup in Mali. Your ambassador went. He was the first one to meet with the leaders of the coup. What is the influence of Moscow in Bamako?
I saw pictures of Malians demonstrating with the portrait of Putin. So from that I deducted that the influence of Russia in Bamako is high enough. Well, look, we by the way, when Myanmar came up, we've been asking our colleagues in the Security Council, can we compare two situations? One in Myanmar, the other is in Mali. Technically, they are very much alike. Why there was not such an uproar on Mali? Although, of course, nobody was happy about the coup that happened. I was joking at that time that perhaps director of the military academy in Russia, where the leader of the coup was studying, and he was on leave in Mali, and coincidentally he was part of the coup, could have called him earlier to his lectures, and that could have been prevented. But it happened that others who were in that coup, they also were studying in other countries, in the Western ones. So it was not just our fault. Look, we have to deal with the de facto authorities. And our ambassador represents the country, and of course, I see nothing criminal in his dealing with the coup. He was reporting on with the military that took power in Mali. He was reporting to the capital what he heard from them, and it's only natural, because it's the job of an ambassador to report to his country what the situation in the country of his residence is. Now, well, I hope that the commitments that the military undertook upon themselves, they will fulfill, and Mali will will sooner rather than later return to the civilian government and to democracy.
Okay, we'll take Carl's question, then we'll go to the chat. Carl, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's great to see you again. I have two questions. It appears, and can you comment upon this, that there are almost two Security Councils now. When Mr. Bustani was prevented from speaking at the official Security Council, you had an ARIA formula at which he spoke, and then subsequently there was another ARIA formula meeting describing with people who were present during the Maidan coup and described another point of view from the one that we are generally inundated with, and also people who had witnessed the horrible fire in Odessa. And so these ARIA formula meetings are presenting us with a very important perspective, which evidently is being blocked at the Security Council. And is this a de facto statement on what the limitations are in the Security Council? And I have a follow-up, since there are a number of very important ARIA formula meetings. There is Dr. Key Park at Harvard University, the director of the Korea project there, and he has offered to speak before the Security Council to describe the horrific humanitarian consequences of the sanctions. And I would, based upon past performance, I would expect he might be blocked there, but could you have an ARIA formula meeting at which he could present these facts to confront the Security Council members who are very, very supportive of the sanctions with the fact that there are horrible humanitarian disasters as a result of these?
I think you raised that issue before, Carl. I remember it. Now, we are speaking about the need to separate political and humanitarian in North Korea all the time. Because, of course, it's clear that there is an over-compliance of the sanctions regime that was imposed upon DPRK by the Security Council. And the humanitarian situation there is dire, indeed. And that was, as you saw yourselves, recognized by the authorities as well, that the situation is difficult. We together with our partners, are advocating on easing the sanctions and on increasing humanitarian aid to North Korea, but it doesn't go through yet. We have a sanctions committee, as you know, which convenes from time to time, and there we are doing our best to promote that. And I hope that how do you call it? The situation hopefully may change on the humanitarian front. I mean, the approaches of those who were resisting that completely, hopefully will adapt. I'm not. I cannot guarantee, but I have a sense that this issue will be addressed in a more pragmatic way. Now on area formulas, indeed, you rightly said that that some area formulas that we held during the pandemic could not have happened before the pandemic for simple reasons, because those people who spoke on the screen would never be given visas to attend an area formula meeting. So that gave opportunity not just to us, but to many others, to raise issues that perhaps were not possible to raise in normal days. We are not rejoicing at that, of course, but we would be glad to see those people that were on the screen here live, because they can share with the international community something which some members of the international community prefer not to notice completely. And I was somewhat ashamed when I heard comments and statements by my colleagues after these presentations, briefings by these people completely ignoring what they were saying, completely, as if nothing had happened, as if they were tokens, as if they were Russian puppets who came out, to speak our script. By the way, when we organize our area formula meetings and where we invite briefers, we never tell them what to say. What we do before the area formula, we tell them about the format, how it works, how long you should speak, what is the order. We never, ever wrote any script for them. So it was genuine from whoever spoke, be it on Ukraine or be it on the chemical Syria. You remember an American general who was there, who was part of the Colin Powell team at that time, who was speaking on behalf of himself. I never saw him before, I never saw him after. That's about area formula meetings.
Ambassador, I can do a quick follow-up on North Korea. Kim Jong-un said there's a great crisis happening there at the moment due to the pandemic. Does Russia have any information on whether there's a COVID-19 outbreak in North Korea?
Not that I know. They were saying, the DPRK authorities were saying they didn't have any cases of COVID, and indeed the country was sealed, basically sealed when the pandemic started. And that was one of the reasons why the situation with humanitarian assistance also deteriorated, because UN could not operate in the country. Some of the personnel left. That is also an issue that adds up to the dire situation, the humanitarian situation in that country. But I have no statistics on their COVID situation.
Ambassador, just a very quick follow-up again on your area formula. Just very, very quickly, do you believe that anyone who is invited to speak at a meeting should be allowed to attend to the UN in New York? Does that apply to Taiwanese officials?
Look, that is a question to be discussed between People's Republic in China and the host country, not by me. But that depends on who will dare invite a Taiwanese official here, and I would be interested to see how the situation will develop if this is the case.
Okay, Abdul Hamid now.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Good morning. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have two questions, one on the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and one on Palestine. So on the Ethiopian dam, the African mediation apparently reached deadlock, and there is no breakthrough. Both Sudan and Egypt wrote to the Security Council to discuss the matter, and it's a crisis in the making, and it could boil into an international crisis that threatens peace and security in Africa. So what is your opinion about the Security Council dealing with this question, and what is Russia can do as a friend of the three countries? That's my question on the issue of Renaissance Dam. But my question about Palestine, yesterday and today, Israel started demolishing 17 homes in the Bustan neighborhood in Silwan. And that is a major catastrophe for Palestinians. Hundreds of members of families will be displaced. What does the Security Council do other than calling on Israel to stop the demolition, stop building settlements, stop doing that? And Israel had never, ever listened to the Security Council. Thank you, sir.
Can I ask you a reciprocal question? What do you want the Security Council to do on that issue? I'm not joking. I'm just asking. Well, what's your view on that issue?
I mean, to respect its own resolutions. They passed many resolutions, including 2334 about settlement. They have been repeating the same thing, and Israel had never listened. And you have good relation with Israel and good relations with the Palestinians. The quartet has not been doing anything, and Russia keeps trying to put some life into the quartet, and the quartet is absent. So what else is it a major failure of the Security Council?
Look, the issue of illegal settlements, an issue of evictions, is a regular thing on the Security Council, not agenda, but in the statements by the member states, and I think that we have more or less unanimity on that issue in the Security Council, with small nuances, but overwhelming majority of the Security Council members, including the host country, are not happy with the Israeli policy on either settlements or evictions. And of course we are concerned because that we've seen what happened in Gaza recently and what provoked the recent hostilities and the recent actions there, and what consequences they had, including for the Palestinians living in Gaza, humanitarian, and for the Israelis who were affected by these events. Yes, the Security Council has adopted a host of resolutions on Middle East settlement, on the settlement of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which constitute what we call a basis for the settlement, an internationally recognized basis. And I think only on that basis this conflict finally can be resolved. For the benefit not just the Palestinians, but the Israelis themselves. And I think that many in Israeli societies understand the need to find peace with Palestinians, to find a settlement to that conflict. The fact that Israel continues these activities is not, of course, a thing that we are happy about, including eviction of people from their homes, which is not very humanitarian and humane at all. We will continue. You said about the quartet. Indeed, we've been trying to breathe a new life into the quartet, including during Trump administration, which had its own views on the settlement, as you very well know. And with this administration. Now the quartet is functioning. U.S. rejoined. You know that we proposed an idea of a ministerial quartet, and even quartet plus, with the participation of some of the Arab countries. This year we celebrate 30th anniversary of Madrid agreements, by the way, and that is a good opportunity to look back at what happened and what has not happened in the Middle East settlement, which we always stress in every statement I do in the Security Council, is a key to whatever settlement in the Middle East. Yes, we witness rapprochement between Israel and certain Arab countries, and we think that it is good, but it cannot be done at the expense of the Palestinians and at the expense of settling the decades-old Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Now, the first question was on the dam. Look, indeed, all three countries are our friends, and nobody is happy that they could not yet agree on that issue. We strongly advocate they do it in a trilateral way, primarily based on the 2015 Khartoum agreements. We are in contact with them, and they are in contact with us on a permanent basis on that issue. I don't think we should discard the African Union mediation on that issue. It is important that African Union is involved because, as we say, African solutions to African problems, and this is exactly exactly the case. So we hope that the issue is resolved. We understand how sensitive it is for all three countries, neighboring countries, friendly countries, countries that play such an important role on the African continent. We will be doing our best. We offered our good offices, including satellite observation of what is happening. We think that the issue needs to be continued to be discussed by the three sides, and that we hope that an acceptable solution can be found.
Stefano Vacara, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Stefano Vaccaro, La Voce di New York. Mr. Ambassador, is San Pellegrino Water a sponsor of the Russian? This is not my question, but San Pellegrino Water is very happy to have you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? San Pellegrino Water is happy to see you drinking that, I'm sure. My question is about the safety and security of journalists around the world. How do you think the Security Council should address the safety and security of journalists around the world, especially for what happened recently in Belarus, also Hong Kong, and before, let's say, in a Saudi consulate in Istanbul? Do you think this is an issue that the Security Council should address? And what do you think of the freedom of expression around the world at the moment? Is it healthy or not?
On the water, I have to tell you about an old Soviet, not even the Russian joke. They said he was not ever considered to be an alcoholic, but he was noticed many times greedily drinking water in the mornings. Look, we support the freedom of expression, and we condemn any incidents that involve journalists. On the discussion in the Security Council, we do not think, frankly, that journalists is a special category of people. Yes, a respected group, respected people who are trying to bring truth most of the time across, and when they are punished for that, including severely, including being killed, because sometimes they work in areas which are dangerous and in the midst of the conflicts, and we know that many journalists unfortunately die in the line of duty. I'm glad that you notice incidents that happen to journalists in countries that you referred to, you mentioned. I hope that you would also notice how the Russian journalists are not perhaps tortured, but are harassed around the world, in particular in the West, and here in the United States. What conditions are being put on them to work freely and to be able to exercise their duties? What happens in Western Europe, which is a beacon of democracy, of course? What conditions they impose of Russian journalists there? Let alone Baltic states, where the situation sometimes for the Russian press is unbearable, and not only there, by the way. This issue we raise all the time in international organizations that address these issues, including OSCE and the Council of Europe, for example. Unfortunately, they remain unattended to. So, on your question to discuss the the plight of journalists in the Security Council, that should be adopted to the Council mandate as well, if we ever discuss such a thing in the Security Council. And at present, I don't see where is the mandate of the Security Council on that issue in particular.
We have time for a couple of more questions. We have Nabil Saab in the chat and Evelyn Leopold. Let's end up with them. Maybe we'll have one more question from the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this briefing. I would like to ask two questions. One on the Syrian refugees. Do you think that the refugees should wait until the political settlement is agreed on, or do you think any progress can be done for the refugees, especially that many of them have voted for President Assad in the recent elections organized by the Syrian government? And two, on Afghanistan, I read here that your colleague in Afghanistan, the Russian ambassador, said that Russia does not see a threat from the Taliban in Afghanistan. So
Russia doesn't see
a direct threat from the Taliban. I'm quoting the Russian ambassador from some news stories came from Kabul yesterday. Is this an indication that you are open to review or to improve your relation with Taliban after the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, or what's the approach for Russia and Afghanistan in the coming weeks?
The first question was on Syrian refugees. Well, I think that that's primarily a personal choice. Each person should evaluate whether he or she can return, willing to return, whether there is a space where to return, whether the return is voluntary and dignified, as is provided for in the approaches towards the refugee issues. But we believe that conditions in Syria for voluntary return of refugees to areas from which they fled at a certain time exist, and many Syrians are returning. On the other hand, they are prevented to return, not physically, but politically, because they are being told that the conditions are not ripe there, that you will be persecuted, that you'll be conscripted, you will be punished, you will end up in jail, etc. Practice shows that this is not the case, and the return to Syria by the refugees has been rather steady in the recent couple of years. I think eventually, hopefully, when Syria is back on track, everyone will return. It's their country and it's their life, and I hope that they will be able to return to the places of their residence in a dignified and voluntary manner and live in a country which is their own. Now, on Afghanistan, on Taliban, I understand that was said in a context. I didn't see the quote, but I understand this quote was a kind of a comparison between Taliban and ISIS, which is also a part of Afghanistan on Afghani landscape, unfortunately. We've been saying that long time, since I arrived here. It was vehemently rejected by our partners. They said there is no ISIS in Afghanistan. Finally, they recognized it. They recognized it, and they know the areas. We all know the areas where they operate. And that was said in a context that Taliban's, as far as I understand, the Taliban's aim is their own country, while the ISIS aim is expansion and jihadist ideology over global caliphate. Now on Afghanistan peace settlement, you know that we are dealing with Taliban. We are part of the peace process, including through the so-called extended troika, which is U.S., Russia, and U.S., China, Russia, and Pakistan. We actively participate in any peace efforts that are being promoted for the settlement, eventual settlement of the situation in Afghanistan. And I think that that should be done early. That should be done early because Taliban itself claims that it controls 80% of the territory of Afghanistan today. How exact are these figures? It's not for me to comment upon, but there should be a solution. And the solution cannot be made without taking into account that Taliban, again, is a part of the Afghani political landscape of Afghanistan. We are doing whatever we can. That is one of the tracks where we've been engaging with the US effectively before and now, and we hope that it will continue to be the case. Of course, the situation in Afghanistan is evolving, including due to the U.S. withdrawal, and it is yet has to be seen how this landscape will change after the final U.S. withdrawal. So all these factors they speak for the need to reach that agreement as early as possible. I think that my meeting on 2231 has already started, by the way. And,
the very last question. Can we? Evelyn.
Who is that?
Evelyn Leopold.
Oh, hello. Good to see you, Ambassador. You can hear me, I assume. It's Evelyn Leopold from Independent Media Institute and Past Blue. I have two questions. Do you think the two-state solution is dead for Israel and Palestine, is dead or on life support? And secondly, there's a UN expert report saying that Russian mercenaries are creating havoc in the Central African Republic, especially on human rights violation. Could you comment on both of those? Thank you, Ambassador.
A question which needs a 15 minutes answer came the last one, and now I will definitely miss 2231, but I need to be there, frankly. On the two-state solution, whether it's dead or not, if there is a will, there is a way. I think there is no other way but the two-state solution, in fact. If we really want a settlement that is lasting and in accordance with the aspirations of the two peoples. Palestinians are no less entitled than the Israelis to have their own state. And that is the position of the absolute majority of the international community. And I hope that eventually we will be able to come to it. Yesterday, I had a privilege, in fact, to be meeting with the President of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, by whose words I was encouraged. He spoke about that thing, about the need to live with Palestinians together, the inevitability of that. There is no way to divorce. There is no way to have Palestinians out. They are part of that land. And he was stressing that point. He was stressing that there is a need to live together in peace. And I was encouraged to hear. But then we'll see. Let's see what will happen. In the future. But I think that my personal view is that the two-state solution is not dead. Now, on this car thing, which we heard a lot recent days, and we spoke extensively on that issue when we discussed the situation in Kar on the 23rd of June. I will not be very much repeating myself, and indeed, I was even surprised that this question didn't come earlier, so I had more time to elaborate on it. If answering briefly, I could only quote the comment by the presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who said that the Russian military advisors could not and didn't participate in killings and robberies. This is another lie. I have a more extensive answer to that, which really needs a separate dialogue. We don't have time for it now, but we have seen the report. We have analyzed what was in the report. We provided comments to that report, which were completely ignored, by the way. And it's the same story. It is ungrounded accusations. It is evidence gathered God knows where. The evidence by witnesses who are not identified, no chain of custody, photos depicting people with white skin claiming they are Russians all the time, as if any person with a white skin is a Russian, with elements of Photoshop, by the way. On every episode that is in the report, we provided comments, as I said. Look, I can give you just one example for a change. According to the Ministry of Interior and General Security of CAR, in May 2021, a French citizen with a large amount of weapons, field equipment, and military uniforms was detained. This is briefly mentioned in paragraph 70 of the body and the annex of that report. And by the way, according to media reports, he traveled in a car with a Russian flag. Does it make him a Russian? My question is. I mean, I could extensively answer your question, but I think I will limit myself to the commentary of the presidential spokesman. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, Carlo.
Thank you very much. I have to go, really. I have to run.